In today's dynamic environment, driving innovation and sustaining long-term growth are more crucial than ever. Because the market life of any product or service is decreasing, organizations can't just rest on what they've done before. Innovation is essential to their continued growth. If not, eventually they're going to decrease and cease to exist. Your work in product management innovation is fighting against this, but what are the simple things that you can do to help your organization really succeed, to really grow? Let's learn together how top organizations cultivate an innovation-friendly culture that embraces risk-taking and seizes opportunities, and how you can help guide this as well. Joining us is Chris Elmore. He is a seasoned tech entrepreneur and a respected college professor. Notably, Chris played pivotal roles in founding of fintech Avid Exchange, a unicorn startup that went public in 2021 with a $2.3 billion valuation. At Avid Exchange, his roles span numerous functions, including development, product, marketing, mergers, and acquisitions. Chris is also a passionate musician, performing solo and as a singer in bands along with his guitar and ukulele. So also I am at the Inspire Innovation Conference recording this interview that's hosted by PDMA. They're the Product Development and Management Association. PDMA members around the world are recognized as really driving innovation in the most respected companies. Their skills, expertise, and knowledge makes a difference in those organizations. PDMA is also the oldest organization for us product managers, leaders, and innovators, having founded in 1976 and contributing research for us in the body of knowledge for us product innovators. I have been a member myself for almost 2 decades now and have contributed back to this organization in a number of ways, most recently being a co-author on the recent version of PDMA's Body of Knowledge for Product Innovators. It's a very valuable organization. If you want to find out more about it yourself, please go to pdma.org.
How can you unlock your full potential as a product manager? We're sharing the product management insights you need. They are based on the 7 research-backed knowledge areas for product mastery. You'll learn to create products customers love, enhance your influence, and elevate your career. Welcome to Product Mastery Now, hosted by Dr. Chad McAllister, product management professor, practitioner, and your guide.
Let's dive in and learn about innovation strategy and driving culture of innovation in an organization with Chris. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. First of all, that was one take, folks.
Well,
that would have been
I have notes.
That would have been like 8 takes for me. I would have never gotten through that. Are you kidding me? You got my intro, you nailed it. You got the sponsorship. Skills.
Well, it's very nice to meet you.
Yeah, there you go.
So
we're
going to have a good time.
We got the fist pump in there.
That's important.
Yeah.
So you are a tech entrepreneur and a musician.
That's right.
And you're here doing a keynote on innovation strategy.
Yeah, radical
really
innovation.
Driving culture.
Yeah.
And you have this experience with this unicorn from like last 25 years. Yeah. So that's
really 25, but then 2 years before that, I did another startup with the CEO. His name is Mike, and he's the real driver behind all this. My skill is to hold on to his coattails, but and people are like, don't play that down, but as much as that could sound like a negative, that's actually the truth, because I really saw him as he was a trailblazer. He thought differently than me. He really he was never satisfied with where he was. And I just envied all that stuff. And I'm like, gosh, you know what? I'm going to hang on to this guy. So it was close to a 28-year run with he and I, 2 companies. The first one, careershop.com, had some success. And then Avid Exchange, of course, had a lot more success with the multi-billion-dollar valuation and going public. And I got a front row seat to all of that stuff.
You got to see how you make the sauce.
Yes, that's
right.
Works,
right?
And then we have in common that we both teach, and I've been teaching for a long time, for 8 years. Well, not a long time, but for 8 years. And I had a student from France where someone says, we want to see how the sausage is being made. And then she said, we're going to make sausage? Like, oh, no. So there's a cultural divide there.
I've gotten myself in trouble with you need to kill your sacred cows.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's a bad one I've learned not to use anymore.
Yeah, that's off the no-fly list. But I love the fact that we're going to talk about culture.
Yeah.
I don't know. By the way, I do something super annoying on all podcasts. I didn't tell you
Let's
this.
hear it.
I always flip and I start asking you questions.
We can run with that too.
What does culture mean?
I think of culture as kind of the largely unwritten values of the organization. It's what you can, it's kind of what is permitted and expected, and also no, we don't do it that way here.
Yeah. How did you come up with that? Because I was half expecting
I
you
also have the
not to have an
startup
answer.
experience of doing everything.
Yeah.
And you kind of learn like, oh, there are things that are permitted, and there's things that we don't talk about that, you certainly don't do. And you kind of just learn, you absorb that through time.
Yeah.
Largely through the stories that are told and kind of the things that are honored. And then you think, no, that's not how it happens here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that's a really good definition, because I always say that one of the things about culture at any level, but through my Avid Exchange experience, we were able to not only keep the culture, but every time we got to a point where somebody would say, oh, by the way, the culture is going to change, they were right. And it usually was, well, so I know this about startups. And man, I don't know if I necessarily want to get into all about startups, but I know this about startups. And with startups, the hardest thing to do is to go from $1 million in run rate revenue to 10 million in run rate revenue. That's the hardest thing to do, because what represents that dollar amount, and it's not about the money, it's about just figuring out who you are, what value you have, and why people are going to buy your stuff.
Right.
So that's from
well
1 to
along
10.
with that, the organization is changing radically.
Oh,
because you're
absolutely.
adding people, processes. You're feeling a little bit of loss of control when you're at the top, right? Things are different.
100%. And then what your natural inclination to do is to hold on to control. And I always tell people that when you go over 10, then you got to put a middle layer in. Now, some people put a middle layer in sooner, but we were so cheap, we just were forced to put that middle management layer. So we never had middle management before. And that was really difficult, really difficult, really difficult. But the thing they say, okay, so when you go from 1 million, there's only one thing that's harder to go from 1 million to 10 million, that's 0 to 1 million. So they said whenever you hit these points, and when you go over 10 million, your culture is going to change. When you go over 50 million, your culture is going to change. And gosh, I shouldn't tell this story, but I'm going to.
We should hear this story.
Yeah, when we went over 50 million, our then VP of sales sent out an article about what it's like to go over 50 million, but he didn't read the whole thing. And at the bottom, it said you should fire your sales director and get a new one. So that was a little embarrassing. But anyway.
Let's not advocate for that.
Well, I mean, and he was really good, because I'm rambling too much. And they even said that when you go public, everything is going to change. And what happened with the culture is it got better. So that's the thing that people don't talk about, is that, yeah, it's going to change, but you have an option to either have it better or to have it worse. There's always the undercurrent that change just means bad.
Right.
That's false, completely false. Now, it requires you to be super proactive about something like culture and really aware of it, because I always say that if you don't define it, it'll define itself, and it does have a tendency to be negative. But last thought, see what you think about this, is that the quickest way to destroy culture is to put someone in charge of it. That's been my experience, and that's a tough thing. Hopefully I hadn't offended anybody, chief cultural officers.
This is a challenging thing to guide culture. And with your experience, I'm really interested to find out how you've done that in general, and then particularly from innovation, right? Because when you're growing that fast, you're just trying to double down, and we found something that works, let's keep moving quickly. Innovation might be the last thing that's thought about in that. But let's pursue the culture aspect a little bit.
Sure.
So when you put someone in charge of it,
Yeah.
there is this discussion that has taken place. Can you even drive culture from top down or not? How do you influence it? Like I said before, stories that get told often can kind of communicate what's important.
Yeah.
You want to hear a quick story?
Please.
So this was a project.
Love stories.
This was a government proposal. Big. I was part of the small team, right, on this, like 2-3 months of work. It was going to be a big deal for our company. And we worked really hard on it and ended up losing the contract, right? We didn't win. So the director of our office calls everyone into the conference room, and we have no idea why. Obviously, we're looking around like, okay, everyone here was involved in this proposal thing. And it kind of had an ominous feeling, like, this could be bad, right?
Yeah.
And he comes in with a baseball bat.
Oh.
Like, okay, what's this about, right? And the guy that led the proposal effort, he said, he hands the baseball bat to that guy and said, this team was amazing. And the guy that led it, he said some good things about him. And you just cleared the field. You knocked things out of the way that were in the way to make all this happen. And we didn't win, but this team, you should be really proud of the work that you did, right? That could have gone any number of ways, but that reinforced a culture element of the organization, right?
100%.
We take risks, we do the hard work, we show up.
That's right.
Right? And it's those little things that kind of, for me, build culture, the things you recognize.
So one of my, so I have 4 kids. It's too painful. I don't want to talk about it. I'm kidding. I love my kids.
You love them all, of
but
course.
The thing is, we have a family culture, and one of the things in the family culture, which you just demonstrated through that story, was, and all of my kids but one are out of school, and so I had a thing with them about grades, because I'm not big on grades, which is kind of weird coming from a college professor. I'm even trying to figure out how not to kind of have grades in my class, which I haven't told anyone about that, because my students would be like, that's a great idea. But I have a thing with my kids that I'm not going to judge you on the outcome, which is the grade. I'm going to judge you on the effort. So if you put full effort into this thing and you make a C, and we know that it's full effort, I'm good. But the funny thing is, when you put full effort into something, you usually don't make a C.
Right.
And there's a good story, because your leader said, you guys put in the effort. We didn't get the outcome. But don't worry about the outcome, because now it's almost like you have inertia, you have a machine, you have the ability, you can reproduce this, and you're going to eventually have the outcome that you're looking for. And that's the thing that I think culture does so well. And that's a great story, because it kind of illustrates that it could have gone the other way, like you said, like everyone's going to get a beating on this thing, and we lost and we're losers, and then that'll be the culture from here on out. You sign up to be a loser, and it's hard to get out of that. But anyway, that's a really good story. It made me think about that.
Okay.
Raising my kids.
And that too.
With a baseball bat.
Yeah, and as the college professor and the overachiever, both my wife and I, neither one of us place a big emphasis on the grades.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, do your best to show up. And they both have done exceptionally well, right?
You told me that your kids were homeschooled.
We did the homeschooling.
I love that.
Yeah.
We did that for 1 year, and my wife, it was like about the 5th year we had started Avid Exchange, so I was gone the whole time. And she was like, I'm not doing this anymore. But I think
it's a commitment. God bless my wife for taking that on.
For sure. But back to the whole notion of culture, if you put someone in charge of it, and I always hate to say that, because that could hit wrong, but the spirit of that is when someone's in charge of something, so when you put someone in charge of culture, it becomes their version of the culture, unless they're really, 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 really good, really good. They're really an inspirational leader, they're a demonstrational leader, they're all the good things that a leader needs to be. But it's rare, usually it becomes a job. And I know we deal with that when, we talk about silos in businesses. Well, you're on the product team, you're on the development team, and you guys don't mix. You just do your work, and that always kind of creates problems. I think I'm here on this earth to help destroy the silos, because, and that's why culture is so important. It's because culture can cut through all of that, and we can start working together, which is what I really want to do.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about that more, the organizational culture. Right? Yeah. So one thing that I immediately just makes the hair on my back and neck bristle when I hear the phrase, well, just stay in your lane.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's this notion of like, you have a role. Yeah, that's important. We don't want role ambiguity. We want it to be clear what we're all supposed to do. But also we're all trying to win, right? And because we're all trying to win as an organization, doesn't that mean that there's times we have to figure out there's things that aren't getting done that someone has to pick up and do? How do you see the organization becoming more of a system as opposed to those individual functions? You're breaking down the silos.
Yeah, okay, it's gonna get weird. Maybe I should make eye contact. It's gonna get, the first place that I wanna go, just personally, is I wanna get rid of the traditional org chart, because I think there's a lot of things that I believe that are wrong with it. Personal opinion, but it kind of mirrors what is like the feudal system, where you have the king and then you have the court and then you have I know it's going to get weird, but it's basically that. The problem with the org chart, in my opinion, is that typically all of the good ideas come from the middle third of the chart. And that's because the closer you are to the customer, the more you're going to kind of understand the nuances that just never drift up to the top.
Right.
And then when you drift up to the top, it's about data and charts and models, and which that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, because who doesn't love a good data model? So, but the thing is, in my world, I want to get down to the emotional aspect of it, because I really believe that the emotion of the whole thing is what's the most important as far as anything is concerned. And that usually happens in the bottom third, like I said. So in order for a good idea to get to the person who needs to sanction the idea or bless it, it has to go through the game of telephone. And I don't know if you know this, but every time the game of telephone was played, because I was that stupid kid who has always changed it.
On purpose.
On purpose. Every single time. I mean, I was born a disruptor. And I just had...
I don't have my tag on.
Oh, you have disruptor on?
I have disruptor on my...
We should talk about disruption. It's one of my favorite things in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But I always... In the game of telephone, especially when you have people... And I don't blame them, but when you have people who are just trying as hard as they can to just secure their own little piece of the pie, they'll do what's best for them, which is fine. Right. But that has a tendency to kind of change the idea. And I think we get a lot of our good ideas just squashed because people don't understand them. In my talk this afternoon, hopefully you can make it, we're going to talk about the outcome of innovation. And there's two things that I believe, just my experience has been around, that tells me I'm on an innovative path. Is one, if people have no idea what I'm talking about, and two, they're terrified of it. When I do those two things, I know I'm on the right path. And I don't do those intentionally just to kind of scare people or be that attention person, but I know that when things are truly innovative and they're important, they just have those two little hallmarks. And it's been around since, we can trace this all the way back to whatever time you want to, because people just don't naturally consume innovation well. They're terrified of it. And so when you're in the bottom third and you have an innovative idea, in order to elevate that up to someone who needs to give it the 1, 2, 3, they'll more than likely fall into those categories. They just don't understand it and they're scared of it. And then that's where our great ideas just kind of fall.
Yeah, and then there's all the other organizational structure problems, because like if you were one of those, if I was one of those bottom third, and I'm like, hey, I met with the customer, I heard this great idea, I've heard it from 10 others, here's something that we need to pay attention to. There's probably things in the organization that make it hard for me to even get that message to anyone that could decide on it.
That's it. Yeah, that's the thing that I struggle with, because when you have the traditional org chart. By the way, every time someone produced an org chart in my old organization, they were always sitting at the top. No one in the middle or in the lower is like, hey, let's go look at the org chart. So I've always been super aware that this could be a strategy to kind of, rein in their control in their position, which I immediately try as hard as I can to debunk, because I'm a disruptor just like you. So I hate that. I drive people crazy with that. But anyway, I do believe, and this is where it gets a little kooky, I do believe that instead of the traditional org chart, I'm drawing it like that, I do believe it's more like a curve. And intellectually, I know this is going to start to get to some weird territory, but the curve basically represents, all right, where does the organization need to be at the end of the curve? And then where's the organization today? And so the curve piece of it represents everyone's understanding of where we're going. And that's the thing. Now, in my world, it's simple, because I've always dealt with revenue. Revenue symbolizes value. It doesn't always necessarily do that. It's not about the money, it's about the value. That's always just been a principle that I've held for a long time, and it's worked. And it's easy, because I know where we are dollar-wise, and I know if we need to be somewhere else, we're either doing more or less than what we need. And so that's kind of where the work starts. But that whole notion of a curve is that it's in the valleys where the leader has to say, okay, who's in the valleys and how do we get them over kind of that hump? And that's my job as a leader, is to help them get further down the curve.
Okay.
Trippy, huh?
Well, a clear vision of the future, of knowing where we're headed to. So how do you describe that? Maybe, I don't know if you have an example from your startup, but how do you describe, like, this is, if you're talking to everyone, this is where we're going to be in a year. This is what things are going to look like. This is why we're working towards that.
That's right.
Or what do you say?
So what I typically concentrate on are just basically 2 or 3 things. I say 2 or 3 things, but one's more material, 2 are a little fluffy. We'll start with fluffy. So it's mission and purpose. I know with the mission here and the purpose here, mission and purpose, what's driving this whole thing? The funny thing is it's not the product. The product produces an outcome. So that's the third thing. The third thing is, all right, what's the outcome? So now you have mission and purpose. Now, and you have outcomes. It's real simple in my mind, and it always has been simple, is that when our mission and purpose is aligned with our outcomes, we're good. And that's on an individual basis. And if it's not, we got work to do. And by the way, if the work can't come together where someone can kind of get that mission and purpose, they can't be in the organization anymore.
I think that's an important thing to say, right? I've always felt like back to organizational culture, there's kind of a certain fit here, right? However we express that we know we're moving forward together, and sometimes there's candidates we look at to hire, we go, and we just say to each other, like, nah, they don't feel like they're going to be a good fit, right?
Yeah.
Like there's going to be friction in that process with us trying to move forward to reach this thing.
Yeah.
And that's important to recognize, because we're doing them a disservice. Like, come join this organization that's not going to work well for you, and you're going to figure that out as soon as we do.
Go ahead.
Right?
Let's go make it happen.
Yeah, right. And that's important to be looking for, that people want to take this journey. And I think the challenge somewhat is candidates learning what that is, what that journey actually looks like, and believing it as well. Are they telling me the real scoop or not?
Yeah, that's why I've never read a resume before in my life. I've never had a resume. I won't do it.
It has worked out well for you.
It's worked out really well for me, because what I get to do is I get to cut through all that noise. And I have my take on resumes. One time I told this at the university, they had me come in, only one time, because they didn't ask me back.
Didn't get asked back. Huh.
They had me come and talk to
I wonder why.
Yeah. Well, I'm about ready to tell you why, because and I shouldn't have been I should have been a lot more self-aware. But I wasn't. I just go in there and I'm guns a-blaze, and I'm like, I've never had a resume before. I've never read a resume before. I won't do it. I won't do it. And I saw it was a big room. There's a lot of people. And I saw the look on the director of the Career Center's face, like, oh, I just screwed up. And she was so upset. She interrupts me. He's like, don't listen to him on that one. But I think there's a certain class of people that overinflate what they do, and there's a certain class of people that underinflate what they do. Right. They're just too humble because they just have a hard time talking about their achievements, which I completely understand. And it's almost like, well, I kind of want them in my organization.
Right, absolutely.
But they don't have enough keywords on the resume, and the system hasn't pinged them to the top. And so hopefully you can tell I'm really about the person, and I'm about the individual.
Yeah, sounds good. Also, I would expect your innovation approach is a very people-centered approach.
It's 100%
right?
people-centered.
What does the product team need to learn about the customer, and let the product team learn with that? Tell us a little bit about how you've seen innovation work out in a positive way.
Well, and I'm going to give you a little bit of what's going to go on in the keynote. I'm super nervous about it because everything I do is real basic, simple. I am from Boone, North Carolina. We put our major appliances on our front porch because we are proud of them. I can hear the YouTube audience laughing.
It's true. I've driven through some of those.
Was that an RV trip for you?
We did the RV trip through all the states in America except for Louisiana. For some reason, we just hit that one.
Louisiana's great. I've been in Baton Rouge multiple times in August. I've never had humidity.
Miserable.
I mean, I like to experience. I thought it was neat. I can still feel it right now. It's probably been 20 years ago. But yeah, that's an interesting little thing.
So
every state. Did you have a sticker?
Oh yeah, sure.
On the back?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. What were we talking about? Okay, my innovative approach is grossly simple. It's really simple. And one of the things that I learned to do in my work at the university, and then that translated into the work that I did at the tech company, is that no one has a really good definition, a really good usable, transferable definition of innovation. And I even looked it up on the Googles. Have you heard of this thing, the Googles?
Interesting.
See,
We'll have to talk more.
I'll show you. I tell anyone over 50 pluralizes all technology.
Yes.
The Google,
We turn these into verbs.
Yeah.
Too. Yes.
I love that. But so one of the Google definitions of innovation is the process of innovating. This is not good. Yeah. It's not good.
No.
Yeah. There's a better definition in there, but that always struck me because I was tasked with teaching a class on innovation at the university. And I said, well, I just need a baseline, and I couldn't find one, so I made up my own.
Okay.
And so here's my definition of innovation. Are you ready? And now, by the way, I got to do this at the keynote in a couple of hours.
I'll give you feedback.
I'm really nervous.
Okay.
Because here's the definition. It's better than what it was.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
What do
So
you think?
I like it. So I think of innovation as we're creating new value, so value that doesn't exist already, for someone, right? I'll call the someone a customer.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So yeah. So and that the better than it was is what we're after.
That's right.
Because if we're doing the same thing others are doing, there's no reason for them to look at our offering, whatever that is. And if we're creating something, because better has an implication to me of some value, some benefit, right?
100%.
If we're just making something different, is another loaded word too, because sometimes different gets attention and that's a positive thing.
Yeah.
But we have to be meeting some unmet needs that are meaningful to the customer, like that, yeah, they really want this problem solved, and we do it in a way that makes a difference for them.
And in some we're going to talk about at the keynote also, I'll drop that but something we're going to talk about is, well, who's the customer?
Right.
And you got internal, you got external,
Yep.
and then the other thing is, you can't forget, part of your customer base is your family. You can't leave them out, because if you detach your family from the work that you do, they could eventually, I have some terrible stories about
Your
that.
life becomes miserable.
Your life becomes miserable. Yeah. Miserable was one of my favorite tattoos, a flying pig. I should show it to our audience here. But my wife's uncle said I would be successful in business when we first got married and when pigs fly. And so when the company went public, I got a pig flying tattoo in honor of him.
Yeah.
I appreciated
what
the motivation.
Unicorn is?
Yeah.
Let me explain this. It's actually a real thing, and it's not an animal.
No, it's so you got to expand the definition of who your customer is, because it's not the people who buy your stuff. I mean, that's a primary definition, and you should keep that, but then it's everybody. And then in the startup tech world, not only is it the people who buy your stuff, the people who invest in you, your bankers, your accountants, your family, it's everything. So you have to serve all of those customers. And you also, like you said, which is what I love about what you said, is that the undercurrent of it's better than what it was means it has additional value. Mm-hmm. And then that's the thing. But by the way, as I mentioned earlier, that's the thing that people are terrified of, and that's the people that say, well, I did a syntax error. Do you remember those? So that's the
semicolon after.
Yeah. That's the thing that people don't understand, and they're terrified. Those two things go, because when you don't understand something, you're just naturally are scared of it. Yeah. So anyway,
and it would be disruptive if it came to be.
Now, the thing I like about my definition that I continue to promote, and I'm going to sell hard, is that when a definition is that simple, one, everyone can be an innovator. Mm-hmm. I know there's a wonderful class certification that PDMA does, and I think you had something to do with. Yeah. Take it. We should talk about education, because I'm going to talk about it right now, that you first of all have to have passion for something, then get education. You can't, in my opinion, if you kind of flip-flop those two things, or you go into education hoping to get the passion, they don't seem to work really well. So when you want to be a bigger innovator, and you want to kind of take the next step, then the certification or the classes that we have here at PDMA are fantastic. But in a real simple definition, to say that it's better than what it was, anybody can claim to be an innovator, which is what I really want to do.
All right.
We had 1,800 employees at my old company. I want every single one of them to be an innovator, because I know how important that is to the business.
Right.
And then the last thing it does, which I think is really important, and this has played out in my career, is that it puts a nice little focus on small innovations. And small innovations over a long period of time is a huge thing. What do you think? I feel like you need to say something.
Oh, no, I'm right on with you, right?
If you want to build $1 billion company, you do small innovations over 25 years.
That's the thing, right?
That's it.
We talk about disruption. It's like most companies don't want to disrupt themselves. Why are we even spending time looking at something disruptive, right? But it's those small course corrections, right? You end up in a different place if you're doing instead of heading that direction, I'm 1, 2, 3 degrees off that, right? It's the small things that we do over time that get us to a different place and get you to be a unicorn company.
That's right. And it's true. And then the other great thing about small innovations is that when they don't necessarily work, they don't seem to have that that catastrophic kind of reaction.
Right.
So if you want to swing for the fences, you want to go big, you also have to be pretty secure with that. Means that you can lose big too, that risk to reward relationship. So that's why I love small innovation a little better.
Excellent. We're going to be wrapping up soon. I have 2 questions for you.
Okay, here we go. Is this the rapid fire?
An innovation quote we'll do in a second, and one's going to be, you said a statement before about you want everyone, right, those 1,800 employees to be innovators. I want you to tell us how you made that happen. First, back to the education thing, another sponsor ad here. PDMA does have a number of training programs, and the education is based on these 7 research-backed knowledge areas for what I call moving us towards product mastery. And I do my own program for that based on this knowledge and that is the Rapid Product Mastery Experience, the RPM experience. This is how you can move your career forward and help your teams and your organization develop products customers love by learning these 7 knowledge areas. They make a fundamental difference in your career growth. Go to productmasterynow.com/RPM to find out more about that and how it can help you and your team as well.
Very good.
Everyone's job is innovation in the organization.
Now,
how do you reinforce that?
Well, I'm going to give you the easy answer, and then I'm going to give you the tough answer. The easy answer is you got to lead it. Okay, that's the easy answer. Okay, so the tactically the way that I did it, I can't claim that this was super successful, but it was the only way that I had, and it's the only way, is that every time someone was hired, I had a conversation with them about their role as an innovator. And I gave them the definition, and I said, it's your job to be an innovator. I don't necessarily want people to be, I don't know how to put this. I didn't necessarily want people, you said their role was to be innovative. I think that's what you said. It's on tape.
Yeah, it probably is. Among many other things, right?
Yeah.
That this is an aspect of your responsibilities.
I wanted them to be aware that they could be innovative, which we're kind of picking words, but
it's a big difference actually, right? Because just like we both teach students how to innovate,
right?
Most of my students show up being a bit nervous about that.
Yeah.
Right? And I teach them a process. Here's the process. Step 1, step 2, step 3 of how to innovate. It's like, oh, I just thought this was for like crazy creative people, right? But no, it's something you can learn. So that is a kind of a different beast. Like, no, we can all be innovators. There's processes to talk. Tony Alwick just walked into the room. Hi, Tony.
He did. Hey, Tony.
And he has a process, right? Jobs to be done, right? We can learn these mechanisms, these methodologies for innovating. It's a different thing, I think, for the organization to say, we also expect that to be an aspect of your job.
That's right.
And how do you promote that? How do you encourage people to do that and hold them accountable for that?
Well, so, I mean, good nuance, because the thing is, if I need people to do their job. That's the first thing.
Yep.
And a lot of these jobs just weren't innovative. They were a process. And so I didn't want, my thought was, well, we have someone who is taking calls all day and satisfying customer needs, and they're pretty routine, which is super important. I call it the front lines of the business. If they're constantly trying to think about how they could innovate their job, it might be ruining the whole thing. But I wanted them to know that there was a point that they needed to think about the definition, which is it's a little better. It's better than what it was. And then when those things are sparked, then I want to have a conversation with them. And the funny thing was, so with this 1,800 employees, at one time we were hiring like 30 people a week. So I was having a lot of conversations. And a lot of people in the business said, you need to kind of concentrate on your stuff and stop having all these conversations. And I said, no, because we had mentioned earlier about the hard thing about a startup is when you go from startup to medium to big, what happens, the hardest part is when I was a startup, every action that I had some kind of an outcome. And then now, when the company was bigger, public, 1,800 employees, my actions influenced the people who influenced the people who influenced the people who influenced the people who had the action. And that was the only way that I was able to kind of help do that influence, because I knew that my actions weren't going to be the end result. So now I needed to get everyone thinking about what it meant to be innovative. And some did it, some didn't.
Sure.
A lot of people found it motivational, which is great. But then it goes back to all the way back to what we originally talked about, which was it did feed the culture. And your definition of culture, I won't get it exactly right, but its thing is to influence people on making decisions. So I don't have to stand over your shoulder and say, oh, don't click that button, or don't do that. And I wasn't willing to do that, and I couldn't do that. So culture was the fastest and quickest way that I could make sure that people were going to be held accountable in their own mind to do what they needed to do.
Okay.
And then COVID came along.
That changes things. That's part two. Okay.
Yeah, our culture improved then too. Our productivity went up.
It surprisingly did for a lot of organizations. Yeah, that's another thing to explore. Okay, so culture, very important to the organization, fostering this culture of innovation, having that expectation from the beginning. We're hiring people with a vision in mind for the organization. This is where we're headed. That means we're going to be having to do some new things, making it better along the way, and setting the expectation that there is that aspect of your job to innovate as well.
That's right. Or just be aware of it.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted. You don't necessarily have to do it, but I just want you to be aware that you're in an organization that values that. Don't go overboard because you get fired, but the people who are aware of it, it's funny, we can see them start in one position, even like at an hourly rate, and then within 3 or 4 years be running an entire division. It happened over and over again.
Yep. To make things better. Okay,
Beautiful
like that.
thing. It's a
Okay,
beautiful thing.
we do enjoy innovation quotes. What do you have for us?
I don't have it.
And I kind of suspect you're going to make this up right now.
No, the one I was thinking about was luck. Now, Earl Nightingale, he said, and this is my quote, he's like, luck, the definition of luck. By the way, let me back up and say, I don't think you can achieve anything without a definition. You have to have a definition for everything. It is a longer podcast, but I have a definition for success, for a good day, for failure. Maybe I'll hit failure, because that's one of my favorite things. I'm really good at that. And then the other thing is luck. Because so many people, when it comes to being innovative, you have to be super lucky. And so his definition that I've adopted is when opportunity meets preparedness. And have you heard that before? And so, but the thing that I wanted to take that quote one step further as it pertains to innovation is preparedness is education. And so the more that you educate yourself, whether it's formally or informally, it's a constant process. And you have to actually obtain the skill of being a learner before you can really get into the education piece. I'm a big proponent of that, because that's the way I tell my kids, you have to learn how to learn. And unfortunately, school doesn't do such a great job with that, especially traditional education doesn't do such a great job with that. A lot of times I feel like what is it, round hole, square peg? With me, there's no pegboard. It's just like floating out in the middle of nowhere. But so preparedness is education. You got to learn. You have to learn how to learn. I'll say it that way. I did just make that up.
I like it.
But yeah, and then the second thing is opportunity, and that is the process of building your network. And then my personal network is my number one financial asset. I treat it like a financial asset. I view it as a financial asset. And when you take a strong network and you put it in the context of creating creative, disruptive, innovative things, it has a tendency to go a lot better because you can rely on that network to help you. And there's a big thing, all CEOs are paid in direct proportion to their networks, because they can't answer. They have questions that you can't answer. So they have to rely on their networks. Right. So I'm a big fan of that.
Right, the people around you. Yeah, so luck is the preparation. Shameless plug for the RPM experience because it will prepare you for that next opportunity.
100%.
And then the network, the people you meet, they create opportunities for you too.
And that's why the organization's so good, back to PDMA, is that we're here at a conference and people are strengthening their networks, and that's going to pay off. Right. Huge dividends.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And I don't know about you, I tell my students that too.
I do.
All my students are graduate students, so a little different environment, they have work experience, but it's like, one of the advantages is not just all the things you're learning. Pay attention to the people you're meeting because they all have really good experience, just like you, and you're going to help each other out in the future.
Yeah, I always tell them, I tell my students, I say, you're eventually going to be paid in direct proportion to your wisdom and your experience. That's what eventually is going to propel you. And then if you take the quality of your network and overlay those two things, then you're going to have a pretty powerful career, but your network starts right here, right now.
Right.
And then you know what? Because I teach undergrads, they just stare at me.
Thankfully, some of them are hearing that.
One of them is it's going to be useful in 20 years.
Or even a couple of years later, it's like, I remember this professor that told me to pay attention to this.
I have had that. I've had students come find me because they said, well, I wasn't listening when you were teaching, but this stuck with me, and that's the payoff right there.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Excellent. Dr. Chad, thank you.
Chris, thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
I'm a little disappointed you didn't bring a guitar or ukulele, but...
I am too. I should have done that because I have a song about our first product launch and I would have played it. So
what was the title of it?
It's called It's a Training Issue. Yeah.
Product people, it's a training issue. We know what that is code for. So that's
it's a true story too. It's
I'm
the exact
sure.
code.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's really good.
Yeah.
So Chris, thank you very much. It's been a great
Thanks
pleasure to talk with you. Listeners, if you want to find the written article of everything we just discussed, simply go to productmasterynow.com/511. As always, keep innovating.
Thank you for listening to Product Mastery Now, where product leaders and managers gain product mastery through practical knowledge, influence, and confidence. By listening, you are becoming a product master, creating products customers love. Find additional resources at productmasterynow.com. Keep innovating.